And it's welcome to We Love Ugly Data, the Deep Analysis podcast. This is episode 41 as we continue our descent into middle age, or series 5, episode 6, if you're counting that way, which nobody is, but for some reason I feel the need to mention every time. Dan was on last month, which means Alan's on this month. Hi, Alan, you're back in the hot seat.
I am indeed.
Back from your travels, and then shortly before your next set of travels.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm off to the Bay Area next week. Yeah.
Awesome. We're trying to do this in early July, a little bit early. So you're recording this on the 8th. I've got a couple of weeks off at the end of the month. So this will be the last time in which you see this view like this. One of the things I'm doing on my holidays, redecorating this room and rearranging it. So in future podcasts, I won't have a piece of gym equipment poking out of my head. So, gradually the production values are increasing. We'll see how that works out. And if it looks the same, I mean, I never got around to it. So just don't mention it. Anyway, that's not part of the format. What is part of the format is telling you the format. And here's the format. Format is, as ever, 3 topics and 30 minutes. If you are joining us for the first time, brilliant. You've got another 40 episodes to go back, so you can understand all the callback jokes, such as they are. You also will not know that 30 minutes is a little bit loose. We tend to go a little bit over those 30 minutes if we get really super into these topics, which of course is kind of the point of this. The last few ones have been quite newsy. These ones are more kind of chatty, but with a bit of not news, but kind of new stuff sandwiched in the middle. Like all good sandwiches, the good bits in the middle. I'm a fan of bread, but still, the point of the sandwich is generally speaking the filling. Anyway, let's get on to the first topic rather than me talking completely unplanned about the construction of sandwiches. New frontier. So. Up on screen for people who are watching, and if you're not, I'll explain what's up on screen. Was a tweet, I will still call them that, from Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, at the weekend, saying the future of the firm, presuming Microsoft here, is a learning loop in which human capital and token capital compound. So of course I read that and I'm thinking to myself, oh, human capital, AI capital together. So that sounds an awful lot like something that will be interesting to us. So he goes on to say, our new Frontier Co. Our ambition is to help every enterprise build its own AI capability and help create a frontier ecosystem. What that means in practice, we'll come to in a second, where every organization can turn its knowledge, its workflows, and its judgment into its own AI systems that continuously improve. And I got to the end of that thinking, that sounds a lot like work intelligence. If you're new to work intelligence, there will be some links into the show notes. Oh, yes, there's show notes. If you're new to us, all the links we talk about this will be published potentially around where you're watching this right now, or certainly on a future blog post from Deep Analysis. You're going to get to all this stuff, including if I can dig out the link to this tweet. So I'm thinking to myself, that's really good to see. It's really good to see that Microsoft are catching up with Deep Analysis research. In fact, again, up on screen, I then took that tweet and I posted it on LinkedIn, saying, at Deep Analysis, we're glad to see Satya Nadella and Microsoft catching up with the concepts behind our work intelligence research that we've been publishing for a few years. I think we've in March this year, we published, I think, the 4th edition? Fourth edition of it? Yeah. And I put some links on LinkedIn to the original research from 2022, which is free, and you can download it from the website in exchange for a few details, links in the show notes, etc., etc. However, I then looked at the blog post on the 2nd of July, which comes from Judson Althoff, who's the CEO of Microsoft Commercial Business, which explains a bit more details about what the Microsoft Frontier company is. And the more you dig into it, it's not quite as exciting as that kind of intro from Satya Nadella talks about. What it really is the Microsoft Frontier company is a bunch of new consulting products where they will send, and I'm afraid we're going to have to talk about forward deployed engineers here for a moment. As a company, we do not like the term. It's not a new thing. Sending in people who are a combination of pre-sales and consulting into businesses to help basically find use cases to build business cases for software is gone on as long as there's been software. Giving them a new name doesn't really change what they do, but it's about putting these forward deployed engineering assets into organizations such that they can help find places where Microsoft products work. Now, Alan, I found this kind of a bit disappointing, having been given that build up from Sajid at the beginning. And again, it feels, and I think this is something we're going to probably return to on the third topic today, like a little bit like technology companies are saying, right, now the problem is not the technology, the problem is you. The problem is you, customers.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been saying this for a very long time. I'm sure we're not the only ones who've been saying it, but as analyst companies go, I think we were pretty much the first. And it's just basic stuff, right? I mean, you can roll the clock back 30 years, and there was a wasn't a pie chart, but whatever it was, some kind of chart anyway, that would say people, process, and technology, right? And
yeah, it's normally me that says that on the podcast, but you got there first.
It's true, and the reality is no IT project, no enterprise IT project goes anywhere without the proper balance between those three things. But we've lived the last 4 years where AI apparently is magic, and don't worry, I'll figure out your processes. And as for the people, well, I don't even really know if I need them. So it was always an imbalanced approach. It was never going to work in the first place. And so I wouldn't say I'm excited by this, because I'm not. But at the same time, it's a sort of an admission of reality, isn't it? That, if you just take Microsoft Copilot, no, take two things in Microsoft world, or three things we know very, very well, which is SharePoint, Copilot, and Power Automate. They've got the tools. Nobody's ever questioned that they don't have the tools. I mean, you can argue.
In fact, you pick up three interesting ones there, because they should be a triptych, triumvirate, however you want to describe it, of complementary things that they're using right now, but they're choosing not to do that.
And they've chosen for a long time not to do that. So, Microsoft, for all their pros, they have plenty of cons as well. And one of them is that these divisions barely talk to one another. So you take Process Automate or Power Automate or whatever they're calling it now, and you take SharePoint. I mean, two different worlds. There shouldn't be. It's as simple as that. I mean, there should be major overlap between the two. For example, the people at SharePoint could have told everybody straight up front, and I'm sure they did, by the way, but nobody listened, that the data inside SharePoint is a mess. And there we go. Yep. There's one foundational problem, right? Your project's not moving forward, right? So clearly nobody at Microsoft learned or understood this. The people in the Power Automate thing could have told everybody, and I'm sure they did, that processes are really tricky, man. It's not quite as simple as you seem to think. You can't just you can use a process mining tool, and it'll tell you what's going on. Right now, the hard work starts.
And of course, Microsoft have invested in process mining. They bought Minet, which is now embedded within the Power Automate world. But Power Automate, which should be, just for people who are kind of new to it, my position is that AI is an important and new and exciting part of the automation toolkit. A part of already in that toolkit was RPA. There are situations where one is good and one where the other is good. One does not replace the other. But in Microsoft's world, and I'm not just saying this on the basis of what Judge Alsop or Secretary is saying now. This is feedback that I'm getting from Microsoft partners and from Microsoft enterprise customers about the communications they are getting from Microsoft, which is, we don't care about anything other than Copilot. The only thing we want to sell you is Copilot. The only discussions we want to have with you are about Copilot. And so even when there's in the process of a large scale SharePoint kind of deprecation going on in the background, where people are having to do migration projects and moving, big bunches of historic SharePoint files into Azure, we don't care about that really. We always want to talk to you about SharePoint. Something else I found which is interesting is listening to a couple of customers recently saying, I don't know whether this is a new thing, so forgive me, this has always been the case, is that Microsoft replace your key account reps annually. And what that means is that they don't really want necessarily, I think, long-term relationships to build up when they might start to side with the customer. But it means every year they have to go through this. New rep appears, new rep doesn't necessarily understand what's going on inside their organization. And can I interest you in some Copilot licenses? And they have to begin the whole explaining how that is or isn't relevant to their organization again. That doesn't necessarily, for those customers that have direct relationship with Microsoft, really engender that feeling that they want to do anything other than sell them something.
Yeah.
And when we get to Frontier Company, this is another thing in which you're going to be sold. This time, it's the same consulting services that actually a lot of SIs have been doing with a degree of success. If you've got a successful Copilot implementation out there, it's almost certainly because you're working with a good SI who's already doing what Frontier Company is purporting to be doing. Sorry, Alan, I interrupted.
No, this is probably a really stupid analogy, but I don't care. I'm a very, very keen home cook. Anybody who knows me knows that, right? And it's almost like somebody keeps trying to sell you salt and pepper, right? Well, I haven't got the dish made yet. I haven't got the pasta made. I haven't got the sauce made. Why are you selling me salt and pepper? It's a little bit like that, because the salt and pepper bring out the flavor, right? And that's what the AI does. The AI does do some magic. There's no two ways about it. But without the underlying data and processes and understanding of the business, it's pointless.
I'd argue actually they're actually trying to sell you a better grinder.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, we've got a better grinder. It grinds finer, grinds better. It needs refilling less. I think it's less fundamental than salt and pepper, which they're the fundamental seasonings behind all cooking, right? Or most cooking. But this is more of a technology play, and a lot of that is around grinding.
And but I mean, again, it's fundamentals, and you can't get away from it. It's fundamentals, and these big companies, and Microsoft's not the only one. Salesforce is figuring.
And we'll come to them a little bit later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's across the board, but it is. I'll just finish on this. I mean, I've been doing this job a long time. I am still fascinated by how Silicon Valley believes its own hype. Mm-hmm. And does not connect with the real world on a regular basis. It just doesn't. It never has, and nothing seems to be changing.
Yeah. I know this isn't the first time recently where we've picked on Microsoft, right? The reason why we pick on Microsoft or talk about Microsoft, to be fair, and the same as we'll talk about Salesforce a little bit better. These are important bellwethers in the case of Salesforce, the business application market. In the case of Microsoft, the business application market, the operating system market, a bunch of different markets. They are, where Microsoft decides to do something, everybody else is going to pay attention to it. In this case, I think it's something which is chasing a market that's already out there. I think they're probably only directing this towards enterprise customers, which will make SMEs feel the way the SMEs already do, that these companies don't really care what they about their business any longer, which is a discussion for another time. But that's certainly the feedback that I get from SMEs recently, is that Microsoft in particular, but other companies aren't terribly bothered about whether they keep their business or not these days. It's particularly when it comes to renewals. But anyway, we'll come to that. Another topic. Onto our second one, and this is very much a I guess it's kind of frontier research in our own senses. There's something that actually we haven't published on yet. There's something that we're in the early processes of talking to customers about, and that's the intelligent content loop. So let me just give it a preface for it, because this is very much direct from the brain of Alan Pell-Sharp. But let me just give you a little bit of preference to that. Actually, Alan sent me this article yesterday from Matt Robinson's Substack, links, show notes, etc., called "The Rise of the House Model." The house model here is not referring to anything to do with music, but it's referring to small models. We've called them in the past, small language models or micro models, I think, also in the past. But that organizations are now, and in Matt's opinion, I'll read it off the screen so you can get it verbatim, because everybody can see the screen. Companies that do know the value of their data and the power of AI are turning their private records, workflows, and judgments into models no other company can replicate, because no other company has the same raw material. If you're regular with us, you go, well, duh. but this isn't necessarily something which has occurred to most organizations outside those which are heavily invested in IM, information management, or in KM, in knowledge management. This is something that we've talked about for a while. Up on screen is a blog post that Dan published in February 2023. So talking about ChatGPT, which was only in its 3rd or 4th month of life at that point, talking in the voice of Alan Pelsharp, although I don't think, Alan, you actually wrote this, talking about the importance of small models, where he actually uses the term elsewhere in the post about.
Oh, I did actually write this.
You did actually write. You actually remember writing that.
Right, yes. This
But
was
important.
Yes.
But the importance of small models using your own proprietary data. At that point, Dan wrote a little bit about small models. The following February, that small models were starting to be considered, or more seriously. Funny enough, by Microsoft, by IBM, by other LLM or companies doing LLM services, going, actually, small language models on proprietary data are better to prevent external hallucinations, so bad guesses being introduced. And I wrote a little bit in March 24 about, these small models will force us to start thinking a little bit more seriously about how we manage unstructured data. So this is something we've been talking about really since LLMs first started to appear on our purview back into the 2021, 2022, which is around the time that I joined. Now, Alan, this has kind of prompted you to think, I think probably from some of the consulting we did last year, when people were looking at maybe more traditional approaches to content life cycles, you're going, well, the content life cycle needs to adapt to these changes in how we're using it, thinking about small language models as an example. And you started to come up with this new content loop informed by AI. So up on screen, I've got the old way, the traditional cycle, and the new way, what's changing with AI. And maybe that's a good sign to hand over you to talk a little bit about the differences between these and how the content loop reflects it.
Yeah, I mean, our industry is sort of based around this idea of a life cycle. And when I say the industry, information management, storage management, knowledge management, records management, document management, right? Any of these managements that are to do with files and data, it's based on the idea of a life cycle. Something is created, or something is used, it might be reused, and then ultimately it goes away. Potentially it's deleted forever or destroyed, whatever, right? There's a life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I know that's really basic, but this is a really basic fundamental that we're just so used to, we forget it's there and how important it is. And it just, well, it's not even just, we did do some consulting that really sparked this, but it been sort of been building for a while. I attend conferences. There isn't a conference where somebody doesn't bring up the life cycle.
Yeah.
There just isn't. Every industry association, every training course out there talks about the life cycle. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong with the life cycle. It makes perfect sense. Something is created, something is used, potentially it's reused, and then ultimately it's of no use, right? I mean, it's just common sense. However, AI adds a layer of complexity here that wasn't there before. And to put it in the simplest of terms, that I'm going to give you another bad analogy, right? It's
okay.
A square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional way just doesn't really work anymore.
So why doesn't it work? I mean, previously we said, that that traditional life cycle of create, label, use, archive, dispose was based on the foundation of unstructured information inside files. Right?
Yes, it was based on files. And if you think about it this way, and by the way, this is a big and deep topic. And even though we've tried to simplify the report that's currently being edited, and I'm going to share with people in some detail anyway next week in Silicon Valley,
whether they like it or not.
Whether they like it or not, and it is long and it is complicated. So I'm really trying. We're not going to cover it properly in here. But the bottom line is, if you think about the file as being a container, that's what it is, right? Yep. This is something we've talked about in the past, but it's worth reiterating. If you take a PDF file that's 1 megabyte in size, you extract the raw data out of it, i.e. the words and the numbers that matter, right? The actual information, the content, if you like. you may only have a kilobyte left. I mean, a kilobyte of data that you extract. The vast majority of this file is a container. Why is it a container? It's because a human needs to be able to read it. It makes that data readable in human form. So I know this sounds like it's going off on a tangent, which is really important. That's why we built these content life cycles, to manage the container. Well, what happens in a world of AI? The container is immediately cracked open, the data's pulled out of it, and in many cases, the container is simply discarded. What happens to that data afterwards? Oh my God, it could be everywhere. It could be automatically updating files in SAP. It could be triggering workflows. It could be being reformatted into different forms. So the point is, this world we've had forever, it doesn't completely go away. The file still matters. The PDF, the CAD file, the whatever it still matters. But we're dealing with a much more complex set of interactions with the data now in a world of AI. So long story short, I don't even like the name. It's the intelligent content loop, but who knows? Maybe
it's not been published yet. As we know, these things are subject to change up to the last minute.
So we're stuck with the intelligent content loop for now. And if you're watching, it's on the screen. We'll be sharing this more widely as we move forward. There is a lot more to it than this, but
let's run through the phases, because
exactly. So let's go through the basic phases, and I'll explain why the phases are a little misleading. But basically, we've got intent and origin. That's sort of right at the beginning, right? What is this? What's it for? Right? What is this information for? What's its purpose? What's its
context, really, isn't it?
What's its context, exactly. Then we go into phase one, which is deconstruction and enrichment. This is what happens in, let's just take an IDP example, right? We now deconstruct the file, yeah? And what do we also do? We typically now with AI add metadata. We add information. Once it reads this, it goes, oh, this wasn't tagged as an invoice, but it is an invoice. Oh, this didn't say it was this, but now I've read it, I know what it is. It starts adding things. So you start enriching, right? And then, so now we know what we have, right? We've got a much richer understanding of the data in the file than we ever had before, or it wasn't technically possible before. So what do we do now? We say, well, okay, what's its relationship? Does this relate to some other information, other data, other files, right? And by the way, how do we handle this? We handled contracts differently to bills of lading. We handle bills of lading differently to delivery notes, differently to invoices, differently to internal correspondence or whatever. So there's a policy element to it. Then phase three, use and citation. So actually, guess what? Now we're actually going to start using the damn thing, right? And citation, where did it come from? Who's using it, right? Why is it being used? Then we go into phase four, learning and derivation. So again, we're sort of doing ourselves a disservice here, really, because there is a whole document and it breaks each of these down into detail, right?
Yeah.
But phase four, learning and derivation, right? This is the AI world, isn't it? We're learning, we're training the model, right? We're pulling vectors, we're updating, we're maybe changing other information now because of the information we've just received. And again, we need derivation. We need to know where these came from. What's the audit trail here? Who changed this? Why did it change, right? When did it change? And then unlearning and semantic disposal, so which is our old getting rid of stuff, right? I mean, there's always still going to be that. I say there's always going to still be that. It's more important now than ever. A lot of companies, most companies, never actually get rid of anything.
Right.
They have to get, and in an AI world, you really have to get rid of stuff.
Right, because what we're talking about here is, if it's sort of like, see, where this connects in the real world of actually using AI is things like context systems like RAG, right? Or the development of those small models. In both cases, those are data in active use. Now, what we know about the collections of data that we store is that most of it is not in active use. Correct. It can still be dug up. But since something's in active use, we want to make sure that it is accurate, up to date, most recent, and falls within the right kind of live and dead dates or disposal dates for them. So that's when this stuff becomes more important. Often we're moving stuff from a lowly backwater or SharePoint, whichever you want to see, and then we're moving into active use where the AI operative, our agent, if we're using in that sense, will treat all of these pieces of information subject to weighting as all being equal, right? It won't necessarily be like weighing up, which is the more appropriate by our context, unless we give it that context, and that's obviously part of what we're doing here within this content loop, right?
And the intelligent content loop. To be honest, I mean, we've done this for us. I'd say we've done it for ourselves. I mean, nobody commissioned this. This is our research. And if I think now, I put an inordinate amount of time into this. It's ridiculous. And the reason why is, well, it could be two reasons. It might be a mixture of both. One, I'm not as smart as I think I am. But two, this is actually really quite difficult stuff to fathom out, right? But I think we have got to a point now where we're sharing it with people. We'll share it with all of the deep analysis customers. If you're not a customer, tough. But you'll get to see it at some point in the future, I'm sure. But I'm going to Silicon Valley next week. We're sharing this with people. I think it's a big deal. I did it. I think it's a big deal because nobody else has done this. I mean,
if you're very into IM, and particularly if you've got a search background, you'll go, well, this is not dissimilar to what you always had to do with search. And you're right. Now, there's two critical points here. First of all, it never worked with search because that point of indexation on update was never wired into the systems properly. It should have been, it needed to be, but you ended up with out-of-date things in the index. Secondarily, the index indexed all of the text. In this case, we're talking about effectively these documents being atomized into embeddings to be recomposed based on a bunch of mathematical criteria based on suitability, right? And so they're basically being then regenerated. That's a very different and potentially powerful, but also more problematic thing if we do not get our housekeeping in order ahead of the game. And that's why you're right. It's that, but it's that to the power of 100 or more, because of the potential problems that could happen if we don't get that stewardship of data right.
Yeah, and as I say, there's a big report in production at the moment. We are sharing it with people. It is version 1, right? I mean, this is something we've done. By the way, we have shared it with some big wigs so far, right? To sort of that we trust for peer review. And the feedback has been really positive. And even if you're not a customer and you're listening to this and you want to know more, please do reach out to us, because ultimately I mean, it sounds very grand and very pompous, but we've done this for the industry. I mean, we are a business, so we are sharing it with our customers first, but we have done this for the industry. And the goal of it is to spark a much needed conversation. So,
cool. Well, look, once we've got something published, I'm sure there will be accompanying a blog post to go with it. We will loop that back and cover that again on a future pod. Maybe next one in August, maybe in September, depending on what else is going on. But it's not the last you've heard of this.
No.
Again, whether you like it or not,
yep,
you'll be hearing that again. Final topic: fear, change, and debt. Which is not as bad as that sounds. Again, we talked at the beginning a little bit about picking on Microsoft or talking about Microsoft. I said, well, hey, we're going to pick on or talk about Salesforce later on. And here we are talking about Salesforce later on. Last month, I popped to the London leg of the Agentforce World Tour, as I do. And they put on a great show, and kudos to Salesforce for doing that. It's a very interesting event for the day. And I always write a little bit of my feelings in the blog post, and I did. It called Salesforce Needs Agentforce to Start Demonstrating Real World Utility at Scale. Links, show notes, etc. But what was interesting about the event this year, and also to an extent last year, because it followed very much in that, was that the technology exists, the technology is available. Salesforce desperately need their customers to use it, and they need it to use it in interesting and exciting ways to demonstrate praxis to bring on more customers. This is the age-old problem for all. this is the classic crossing the chasm thing which they're facing up to. But what was interesting, what I want to talk about now up on screen is a pull quote from mine from that piece, where Joan Tazella, who's the President Enterprise AI at Salesforce, was the big visitor from the US who came to talk. And in the press Q&A, he talked about there being sort of 3 key reasons why maybe customers are not picking up Agentforce and running with it as fast as Salesforce would like them to. And he said the first of these is fear, a general uncertainty around the technology. The second, these are challenges around managing change. And the last is the weight of technical debt. And I wanted to cover this. I'm covering them just quickly in reverse order because the one on technical debt is something we do need to talk about more. And we do need to talk about it specifically in the context of vibe coding at some point in the future. We've mentioned it a little bit, I think, in our quarterly thing. But what we are doing right now as we rush towards doing this is creating a weight of technical debt, particularly around managing the software that AI is writing for us in the future, that I don't think anybody has really got their arms around the problem yet, because we're churning that code over so hard. So yes, technical debt's important. We'll come back to that, and let's park that one for now. So let's just deal with those first 2, Alan. General uncertainty about the technology and challenges around managing change and change management in general. The second of those is something that I know that we've talked about a lot internally as being issues for organizations. And I'm guessing the intelligent content loop is probably part of that change management environment that we want to encourage customers to start to think about here.
Yeah, I mean, if we just take a piece of content, I don't know, let's use a really corny example, a contract, right? Yeah, you can use AI and agents to do a lot of that work. The technology works. We're not questioning the technology. But when you start to implement it, you start to realize you're looking at radical change within your organization. Mm-hmm. And change is not easy. It's never been easy. Change management is really difficult, and most companies do it very, very badly. I mean, we can even get down to super basics like, they'll plan it all in the background without talking to the end users because they know the end users aren't going to like it. Well, guess what? It's going to fail, right? Because only the end users know how this job works in the first damn place, right? So if you didn't involve them from the get-go, whatever you've designed is probably wrong. So these are things which are beyond Salesforce's, responsibility, you can argue. But this is something where there is a need, and we're talking about Salesforce here, but this is for all companies.
Absolutely, yes.
They need to help people with that. They need to have methodologies. They need to have training. They need to train people to manage change in an AI agentic world, and they're not doing it. Nobody's.
So this is kind of a bit back to a callback to the frontier code that Microsoft are putting up that we talked about in the first topic here. That's their pitch. Microsoft's pitch is we're going to go into your organizations and we're going to find those use cases and we're going to help partner in some way to do that. We're going to go in and we're going to be the change engine for you, right? And that's not necessarily what Salesforce is saying here, because one, they don't have the weight of an organization to do that, and a degree of this it needs to come through, their work with their big integrators, their big consulting firm, consulting relationships to do that. Again, I am touched a little bit again about something that you and I and Dan have talked about, and I know it's one of Dan's big hobby horses is telling customers that it's their organizational structure is the reason they can't make more use of a new technology, rather than maybe the technology doesn't necessarily fit into those ways of working in a way that's easy to adopt. And that's where they're caught a little bit.
But I think there's more than that. I think one of and it touches on all of these three things really, is that, hey, look, I can do this job so much better with this agent, right? Yeah. Do you do it so much better that I'm prepared to take on the risk, the cost, the complexity, and the upheaval? No. in many cases, yeah, you can do it better, but this is the way we do it, and it works just well enough.
Yeah.
So I think there's issues like, I mean, that's always going to be a challenge with software, with enterprise software, right? Can you do it better? Yeah, but you know what? It's good enough, man. This isn't a priority for me.
And thinking a little bit when we talked earlier on about, you know, there still being a role for in Microsoft in Power Automate and in Salesforce for flows and their various RPA bits and pieces as well. There's a tendency when you start to have those discussions with customers, the parts of the organization who are already switched onto automation can tell you where the automation could be improved. They can tell you a little bit about the things they can't do in the automation right now that maybe they can do with agents. So what you end up doing, I'm going to use my banned phrase from a couple of years ago, we end up creating faster horses, right? We make an automation that's already performing at 90% and make it 95%. Isn't there ROI? Probably there is for organizations who are doing that at scale. Does that move overall the implementation of agentic technology into the organization more broadly? Absolutely, it does not. Right, but you do tend to look at those parts of the organization who are experienced and friendly to automation, who can articulate quickly where it can be improved, and you focus on them first. So where that's good to have those lighthouses inside organizations, you're pushing already an open door here. You're not broadening out the reach, and really both Microsoft and Salesforce needs to broaden the reach to parts of organizations who haven't previously touched automation. Yeah. But to do so, you're going to need to do the prerequisite work, which we all know from doing, you know, consulting discovery, takes a lot of that time as you actually discovering what is going on and how things work.
Yeah, and well, first of all, full disclosure, Salesforce is a good customer of deep analysis. No. But secondly, because they're a good customer of deep analysis, we also happen to know that they are doing some good stuff to try and move the needle here. The still recent Rigello acquisition and what they're doing there. I mean, so this is a challenge for everybody. It really is. Well, it's a challenge for everybody, but some are starting to realize that they've got to deal with it. Salesforce, to be fair to them, is one of them. Microsoft in their own way is another one. But there are still plenty out there who still just go in with fancy technology and say, I can do it better. And everybody says, I don't care.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you know, calling out Microsoft and what they're doing with the Frontier and calling out Salesforce are as examples, as I said, of them being bellwethers in their respective parts of the industry and being of significant interest to everybody else who tends to watch them to see what they're doing. And that's why we tend to call them out. That's it. We're up against time. That went past really quickly again. Next time in August, it'll be Alan and I. 3 more topics and 13 more minutes to discuss them in, and we look forward to you joining us again. Thank you very much. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.